done with some randoms. Nice. Good. Yes. Wow, we're 2 for 2 now. Nice. Wow. Nice. All right, 4 for 4. I only thought one of them was down. GG's. All right. 5 out of 6. Yo, guys, what is up? Max on our first Descendant video, and today we're going over my updated Valby guide. Now, this is a little bit more, there's a lot more changes in this guide than some of the previous ones I did, mainly because we've got a brand new build in here for Spiral Tidal Wave. Spiral Tidal Wave is a Transcendent mod for Valby that allows her to really make the Gluttony mechanics easier. And so we've got a Gluttony carry build. I tested this build just going into public matches. I tried to get 5 clears out of 5 clears in a row. We did only get 5 clears out of 6 clears. We did fail one. It was kind of my fault. But I want to show you guys the Gluttony carry build that Valby allows her team to make Gluttony fight way easier. And then we've also got updates to her mobbing and general bossing builds. So I hope you guys enjoy the full update. Let's get into it. So the first build we're going to talk about is the Gluttony build. Now, this build had a few goals in mind. The first one is to make the Gluttony mechanic way easier for you and your team. If you did not know, Gluttony is the hardest boss in the game right now, and most fights end either to people dying too much, or a lot of the times the fight ends because Gluttony's gun basically overheats. It builds up this purple meter, and if it gets all the way up to the top, he will wipe you and your team. Now, in order to prevent that wipe, you need to shoot these frozen orbs into him to cool off his weapon. However, Valby has a mod called Spiral Tidal Wave that if you're near one of the frozen orb dispensers, you can just spam this ability at Gluttony, and it will carry all of the frozen orbs towards him, which makes it a much easier time cooling him off and can kind of prevent his wipe mechanic. If you just have one good Valby on your team, the fight becomes drastically easier. And so the goal of this build, or one of the goals, was to be able to spam Valby's 1 on a low cooldown with low cost and good energy upkeep so that we can do that ability all the time. The next goal was to get tanky enough that we could tank Gluttony hits. We can tank, I think it's 4 or 5 hits pretty comfortably. We also have HP collector, so it's easy for us to get our HP back. But there's a few things that we're doing to be able to just kind of face tank Gluttony hits. Obviously, you're going to want to be trying to avoid those attacks, but if you do get hit, you will absolutely not get close to being one shot on this build. You should be able to tank quite a few direct hits from him without an issue. And let's talk about that first. So in order of mods that we need to do that, the first one is antifreeze solution. This is going to give you frostbite immunity, which prevents you from freezing. If you are frozen during the fight, you can't cast your 1, which is your most important ability. You want to be upkeeping that on Gluttony the whole fight. And it's going to buff our chill resistance. So we're getting freeze immunity so we don't take a bunch of damage randomly and die. And we're going to be buffing up our chill resistance. Gluttony is mainly a ranged attacker. There's no reason that you should ever be close enough for him to melee you. So chill resistance is your probably #1 priority stat for surviving some hits from him. The next thing that we're going to be using is sensory depth. This is a 13.5% decreased damage that's incoming for you, which is an additional multiplier on the amount of damage that you're going to be taking. So we've got chill resistance, which is going to reduce the damage we're taking. We've got sensory depth, which is going to reduce the damage that we're taking. We're also, anytime that he wants to aim at us or deal damage to us, we're going to make sure that we pop our third ability. This gives us increased movement speed so that we can just dodge his attacks. But if we do get hit, it's a 50% damage reduction. So we've got multiple sources of damage reduction. And then we've also got a large HP pool. We're going to be using increased HP and HP amplification to get a comfortable 22. I've got 22,000 HP. If you swapped one of my components out, you can get to 25,000 HP. So we've got chill resistance, we've got DR, we've got HP, And if you do take damage, we're also going to be rocking HP Collector so that we can kill enemies and get our HP back. All of these things will allow you to comfortably fight Gluttony. And then we've got things like Nimble Fingers, MP Conversion, so we've got tons of cooldown on our 1 with Maximized Conservation so that we can spam the 1 without having to worry about the cost of it, and Energy Collection when we do get energy or any energy that we're using, such as like MP Recovery in combat. We're going to be constantly able to upkeep our 1, which once again is really important because if you run out of mana on Valby, all of a sudden you can't do your Spiral Tidal Wave and you run the risk of Gluttony overheating. Now we are, for Gluttony, going to be running Shot Focus. This gives us increased firearm attack damage. If you do not have Shot Focus, you could substitute this either out for an additional chill resistance mod like Cold Antibody. You could sub this out for Walk a Tightrope. The reason we're not using Walk a Tightrope on this build is I didn't want to kind of incentivize playing at low HP. If you get low, you are like kind of a carry for the team. So you don't want to be staying low. You want to get HP back. That's part of the reason why we're using HP Collector. I didn't want to incentivize a low health playstyle with this. So that's why we're not using Walk a Tightrope. But chill resistance or defense would be kind of like what I would substitute Shot Focus here. And you can put like a C, so you could swap between like Cold Antibody or defense here. I personally would recommend like Cold Antibody though. The last thing to mention for Gluttony is the weapon that we're going to be dealing damage to him with. Obviously, we're not going to be dealing any damage with our abilities for the most part. We're not scaling the damage of our abilities, but I'm just going to be rocking my Enduring Legacy with the same build. The big difference on the build is I took off Sharp Precision Shot rather than Mental Focus. The big reason for this is because we want to constantly be using our 1 on Valby, and every time we use the 1, we reset Sharp Precision Shot, so then we have to reboot with minus 20% fire rate, and it felt pretty bad to constantly have to kind of like recast our abilities and then lose a bunch of damage on our gun. So Mental Focus allows us to do a lot of damage without having to worry about losing damage if we cast our abilities. You know, the Mental Focus will stay stacked up for the most part. You just cast your 1 and then keep firing. So it doesn't give like a hard reset like Sharp Precision Shot does. For your Reactor, obviously the like damage and mounting does not matter. So ideally you're just rocking something with gold cooldown and like as much skill cost reduction as you can get. I had duration and cooldown up, which is more than fine. For your external components, I would look for just as much HP as you possibly can get, and finding chill resistance on your sensor is really nice. Getting chill resistance and max MP or chill resistance with MP while in combat, both roles are really nice. I honestly did a few runs with just my Annihilation sensor with MP recovery in combat plus max MP for like maximum spam. And this, even though we were like lacking a little bit of chill resistance, still let me tank plenty of hits from Gluttony if you don't have that chill resistance roll. And then I was rocking an Annihilation with MP recovery modifier and defense, and then a Slayer with just Slayers roll with more HP than a lot of other processors. So that's what I was rocking. Next up, we're going to talk about our mobbing build. Showing on screen is my old mobbing build. This was obviously set up a little bit budget because 1, we were missing a mod, and 2, we didn't have this catalyzation update where we could really min-max this a bit more. And so what I've come up with is, in my opinion, a much better build than the old build because it's more min-maxed, and obviously we're filling out all of the module slots. And so this is the mod that we're going to be, or build we're going to be rocking. If you're playing solo, I would swap out Energy Collection for MP Collector, but you don't need to do that either or. But definitely Energy Collection seems to work a little bit better in co-op because obviously Valby is a dot focus character. If you're not last hitting, you're not going to be getting MP Collector to proc, so this works a lot better in solo. But a few big changes, the first of which is we're not going to be using the Decimator mod. Decimator is a great mod on Valby. It nets us out on our 3rd ability, which is our highest damage ability for this build. It nets us out about a 24.5% damage increase. Obviously, it's 50% modifier, but if we get our base modifier plus this and what the actual damage increase is, it's around like a 24-25% damage increase. However, because of our high crit rate, and we're already going to be using crit mods, adding a mod like Frontlines from our base crit to the new crit damage and crit rate increases that we get from subbing out Decimator for Frontlines. Frontlines is about a 47% damage increase, so we're getting a lot more out of Frontlines than we are using Decimator. And obviously, we still have space for Decimator. We've got space for another gold mod. The big thing with Valby that's a bit tough is she wants a lot of things, right? We absolutely want range on Valby. We need range so that she can hit a bunch of things. We need duration on her. We want her dots to stay on the ground as long as possible. We want cooldown. We want to be able to constantly spam in our 3. And so there's like, she's pretty tight on what modules you would actually use. We're going to be rocking 1 range mod, 1 duration mod, 3 crit mods. You could technically sub out energy collection if you really wanted to for a 4th crit mod. I would rather have the quality of life of high energy upkeep. We're going to be using double focus mods, focus on non-attribute, focus on dimension, with 1 large cooldown mod in MP conversion. This gives us enough cooldown so that we can stay in her 3 all the time if need be. The big thing with Valby is all of her dot damage stacks. And so even though her like 3rd ability is the highest modifier of her abilities, you're still going to want to be casting all of her abilities fairly often because the dot damage will build on enemies. And so especially if you are killing enemies that are in an area where they're constantly respawning, you're going to kind of want to be using all of your abilities on that respawning area to get the highest amount of DPS. The next big change with the mobbing build is we are absolutely wanting to be using the Peacemaker on her. Now, this just got buffed. It is obviously a difficult weapon to acquire because you need to kill Gluttony for it, but hopefully the build in here will help you get those kills so you can build the Peacemaker for the mobbing build. The reason we want the Peacemaker, my camera's blocking it slightly, but whenever we're using a dimension or fusion skills, we're going to be proccing single reload for peace. While single reload for peace effect is fully stacked, aiming and shooting will rapidly fire all loaded ammo. However, every stack of single reload for peace is going to be stacking up non-attribute skill power, up to 43% increased skill power on Valby, and it prior to its buff had a 30% skill cost increase. So if you were holding this, your skills would cost 30% more at a 4-4. Not only is it a 0% cost, so our skills don't cost any extra, but it's significantly easier to stack on Valby because it used to just be dimension, so it only proc on her 2 and her 3. Now it also works with fusion, so you can just spam the 1 and stack this up. And just to kind of show you the damage, I don't have a great reactor right now, but if we are using our abilities on these enemies with our crit hit rate and supply moisture, obviously we're going to be critting a lot, but those crits are going to be hitting really hard. So let's make sure that we get our 5 out of 5 stacks. There's our 5 stacks, and there you can see our dots are ticking for I think the highest I've seen was like 426k. Looks like about 426k. And on my reactor, the only damage increases I have is blue dimension. I don't have crit damage increase or anything that would really make that much higher. So we are doing significant damage on Valby, and that damage is much higher if we're holding the Peacemaker, which you will just stack just by playing her. I've used 2 abilities, 3 stacks. There isn't any chance it's guaranteed as you're playing her. As you're using her abilities, you will just build up stacks of this thing. As you can see, like we're just did a little bit of a rotation, and we're already at our 5 out of 5 stacks, and I think it looks like we're hitting for 488. Pretty nice, pretty good with all of those dots. Next up, we've got the Hydrobomb build. This is a relatively new Transcendent module for Ultimate Valby. It's an Ultimate Valby exclusive, and it allows her to basically turn into Ajax. What this does is it turns her second ability, which normally only has 28% damage modifier, to a non-dot skill that does 765 damage up front. We can get this on a very low cooldown with this setup. It does, by the way, note, change it to a fusion skill. It no longer is dimension. So if you're using like a dimension reactor, you'd have to change to fusion to get the most out of this thing, which I do not have. I've still got dimension on. So now we've got a peacemaker, non-attribute dimension fusion boost and skill cost reactor, which is like for the most part pretty great for this thing. But the big goal here is just to dive bomb enemies on low cooldown for hitting them as much as possible. So real quick demonstration, let's stack up our peacemaker. We can just stack that up real fast. There's 4 stacks. There's 5 stacks, and now we can do our dive bomb. Do about 1,000,000 damage on the dive bomb, which is very nice, and have it on low cooldown in a big AoE. And this build, if you want to run it, is pretty fun. You can also do a jump into the dive bomb to go even higher, or like do it with like a grappling hook if you wanted. So you can grapple up and then dive bomb and just superhero land for 1,000,000 damage on a bunch of enemies. It's pretty fun, but it definitely like not a necessary build in my opinion to make on her. We're going to be rocking Dangerous Ambush. A lot of times you can hit enemies that aren't targeting you with this because you're coming from the top rope. We're going to be using MP Collector. Once again, if you're playing in a group, you can swap this out for the Energy Collection mod. We are going to be killing enemies pretty quickly though, so MP Collector is quite nice. We want as much cooldown as possible, so we're going to be using Nimble, MP, and non-attribute for extra cooldown. Some HP for some survivability. The max expandable range of this is 250, so we're going to rock skill expansion and a unfully ranked maximized range, so we don't lose too much modifier, but we still get to 255% range, so we're good there. And then lastly, the big mod to run is maximize conservation. This gives you less skill cost and less modifier we don't really care about. We've got plenty of it, but the big thing is we want to be able to spam our abilities, particularly because one, you're going to want to be launching from within water. So if you're launching from water, you're going to get 30% decreased MP, and you also want the enemies you're landing on to be inflicted with laundry. So you're going to want to be spamming your abilities quite a bit, because you're going to get 15% increased damage per enemy inflicted with laundry, and your 1 is going to be your primary way to apply that debuff. So maximize conservation so that you can constantly use your abilities is really great. And then lastly, I just threw on non-attribute Succinctium for an additional skill power. If you wanted to recatalyze this slot, which I didn't really feel like doing, you could definitely go for a focus on fusion, but we already have this catalyzed for other crit builds, so that's a pretty good option, and it's going to give you more damage. Next up, we've got our bossing build. This is specifically for not gluttony. This is just a build that you can take into any boss. The big difference between the Gluttony build and the bossing build is we are going to be dealing a lot of the damage versus the Gluttony build where we've got lots of survivability, we've got lots of cooldown. We're not going to be scaling up our guns quite as much. With this build, it's all about getting a ton of damage with a lot of survivability and supply moisture so that we can buff up the gun's crit chance that we're using. So with this, some important mods, we're going to be getting a lot of HP from increased HP plus time distribution. This gives us the cooldown that we want, plus it's going to give us some extra HP. We're going to rock Nimble Fingers for more cooldown. We've got maximized conservation. Once again, we're not really scaling the damage of our abilities. Our big thing is we want water to be down all the time, not only to debuff the boss, but also give us our supply moisture, crit hit increase. Once again, supply moisture is going to give us crit hit increase, and skill crit rate and skill duration up for bossing. Primarily just using this for our guns though, so we don't really care about the other stats. Energy collection for more MP during the fight so we don't run out of our abilities. Walk a tightrope plus shot focus for a lot of gun damage. And then instead of rocking a defense mod, I opted to go for sensory depth so that we are taking reduced damage. We're going to try to be at range most of the time with this build. You're going to be throwing out your 1 to proc your debuff on enemies, but also you're going to want to be just keeping water on yourself. And so sensory depth works out very well for us there. And I did go for a range mod just because it's quality of life. You don't want to have like kind of a moment where you're just slightly off your water and then losing like 50% of your damage because your crit rate drops a bunch. So skill expansion is just quality of life here. Obviously, you don't need it if you plan on standing in one place at all times, but sometimes it's nice to have the extra range so you can kind of walk back and forth while shooting and kind of avoid some damage. For bossing, I'd recommend things like Greg's Reverse Fate, Enduring Legacy, Afterglow is fantastic. Executor, if you have enough ammo, obviously works very well on Valby because she can debuff for like its electric damage and put electric on it. Obviously has some like damage issues or ammo issues. And the Secret Garden is also very nice on her. But these are kind of the weapons that I prefer to take into her with bossing. The big thing to note is I do for bossing with the Enduring Legacy versus the Gluttony build, I do prefer to rock sharp precision shot. You will be able to fire off a full mag if you put down your 2 at your feet. With our bossing build, you have 21 seconds of buff, which is more than enough time to fire off a full mag with sharp precision shot. So you don't have to worry about having to constantly recast to keep up your like supply moisture buff on your weapon. Guys, that is going to do it for the video. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know which character you would like to see next, and I will catch y'all in the next one. I do want to note that I am trying to move across the country in the next 11 days, and I haven't found an apartment yet. So I will be trying to upkeep with videos, but just note that I've got some things going on that I got to do in the real life. So just a heads up, I still got like a few videos on deck that should be coming out while I'm away. But I am traveling to go look at apartments when this video is live. All right, guys, take care. Peace.